Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 58 of the Resilient Podcast. Today in studio, we have a special guest, someone who I recently connected with on social media, and we instantly kicked it off. You know, this is a gentleman who, from what I've gathered so far, is pretty inspiring. I'm not going to give you too much information about him because we're going to let him introduce himself properly. But it is episode 58. The name of this episode today is Equanimity, and it is officially June, and it is officially also Men's Health Month. Last month was Mental Health Month. Last month, we recapped on a lot of things. We talked about my birthday. We talked about, my 40th birthday, the 40th chapter. We talked about, Arrested Development. And then we talked about a lot of good things that fell into the category of men's health and mental health as in general. When Andrew and I connected, it was one of the first things that, we talked about was men's mental health and whatnot, and resilience. So we're going to talk about resilience today. So Andrew, I appreciate you for being on the show today. And if you could just take a moment to introduce yourself to the world, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rob. First and foremost, thank you for having me. It really does mean a lot to me. I did pour a lot into that book that I wrote, reliving every traumatic experience. But at the end of the day, I did it so that somebody who's struggling in the real world can read it and realize that they're not alone, even if it's just through a book. But I grew up in Brooklyn. New York, and I moved to Las Vegas at the age of 13. And that's where a lot of my story takes place. A lot of it hinges on the fact that I moved to Las Vegas at the age of 13 with absolutely no understanding of who I was as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And that's essentially what my story is about, just recurring identity crises, and whether I came back from them or whether I didn't, or at some point, and we'll get into this, I finally figure it out. And that's what I'm really here to share, that message that if you're struggling and you're a man, you're not alone, not at all.
I appreciate that. That's a message that I share with everyone all the time, especially men here in New York, all over the world. You mentioned your book, so we're going to talk about your book in a few. But the first question I wanted to ask you, the name of this episode is Equanimity, and the word equanimity, is it about, to me, the word equanimity is about remaining grounded and composed through life's highs and lows.
Correct.
So my question to you is, what does equanimity personally mean to you? And how has your journey taught you the importance of emotional balance during adversity?
Well, it means just that, just like you mentioned, being even keel throughout everything that goes on in life. Because if you were to take, my life is essentially split into two parts. Before I decided to get, I'm also a recovering addict. So before I started to get clean and after. And equanimity was not a part of my vocabulary beforehand. So equanimity, like you said, is a state of mental composure, even under the most dire of pressure. So the reason why it's so important to me is because I realized that most of my problems growing up were of my own making. They
Mm,
weren't, I mean, yeah, yes, my parents died, just to give you a preview of my book. But my reaction to that was made it 10 times worse.
mhm,
So until I was able to strive for equanimity, I was just essentially a self sabotaging time bomb.
mhm. It's that word self-sabotage.
Yeah.
Something that I can relate to, something that I've heard over the years. I was in a relationship one time that my former partner at the time brought that word up, self-sabotage,
Right.
and said, sometimes in disputes that we had, she brought up the word self-sabotage, like, oh, stop self-sabotaging yourself.
Hmm.
Or sometimes things that I did or things that I was going through that seemed like a pattern,
Hmm.
she would say to me, and also in therapy as well too. When I started therapy, that was the word that came up, with self-sabotage. Maybe you're self-sabotaging yourself, Rob. Or
Right.
I would say, like, I went through this, this just happened to me, that just happened to me. I just had something really good going on, and because of my insecurities, I destroyed it. And then they would bring up the word self-sabotage. So
Right.
self-sabotage is real. It's a real thing, folks.
100%.
I mean, it's very self-explanatory. The word self is in there. Sabotage. You're sabotaging yourself. You are not allowing good things to happen for you.
Right.
You're not allowing positive people to come into your life. You're blocking all positive people to come into your life because you're so insecure about people's intentions, which is normal. Because you know what I tell people, Andrew, all the time. I say to people, I wish, especially with now this whole thing with AI and all the stuff that we see on social media every day, I tell people I wish that in real life there was a way that when someone crosses paths with us, we can see like a sign above their head that either says they're actually going to be good for you, they're going to be bad for
Right.
you, like some type of
Right.
disclaimer. I wish everybody came with an actual physical disclaimer above their head. So
Yeah,
you
because
could easily.
naturally you want to believe that everybody has the best intentions, especially if you
Exactly.
were raised well. One of the things that really plagued me was I was raised, textbook upbringing. Um,
Yeah.
both parents around, always had food on the table, never had any of my needs not met. So when
Oh.
it came time to be an adult and I started dealing with people who don't have the best intentions, I wasn't
Mhm.
equipped for that. I had no idea how to handle that because I
Yeah.
assumed everybody had the same intentions that I do.
Yeah. I know that's the thing. A lot of people are like that. And very quickly before I ask you this next question, I wanted to tell you. So I recently did a documentary, and we are in post production to release it sometime later this year. Hopefully, by the beginning of this winter.
Right.
And the narrator of the documentary is a friend of mine by the name of James.
Hmm.
And James is, he's a Christian. Well, he's actually a Mormon, and he, once told me in a conversation that we had, which I felt was like a very honest conversation. He said to me, like, listen, like, I'm not expecting people to be the way they are. And I'm like, James, like, you're like 40 something years old. Like, life has showed you so many things. How do you still have this feeling that people just don't do bad things or that people are different from you? And I
Right.
remember him like discussing something that I told him, I wish you had not told people about that because that's something that I wanted for us to keep confidential. And
Understood.
he said to me, well, where I come from, we share everything and it's not an issue and it's not considered gossip. It's not considered, drama. It's
Hmm.
just us having a conversation as humans.
Right.
And I said to him, James, I wish we lived in a world where people wouldn't be judgmental, where you could share any type of information with people and people's processing, like their thought process was so positive, where even
Right.
if you shared something that was kind of crazy, people would be like, oh, wow, well, that's interesting, opposed to people saying like, oh my God, that's so crazy. That's ridiculous. Like, why would that happen?
Right.
So, I remember having that conversation with him and telling him, like, James, unfortunately, we live in a world where there's two things. Well, actually, three. There's three sides to everything that happens in life. There's the good, there's the bad, and there's what's in the middle, which could
Mhm.
be either indifferent, whatever the case may be. So, you know, like you mentioned, Andrew, I grew up in a very hostile, toxic environment. I grew up by a single parent, which was my mother. My
Right.
father's always been in my life, but I don't want to say that. I don't want to use the word present. He hasn't always been present. My father's 75 years old. He just turned 75 2 months ago. And, he's still around and I love him to death. And long story short, I feel like there was a time in my life that I went through something really bad and he showed up for me. My mom made a quick phone call and literally said to him, and I was in my mid-20s when this happened, and my mom called him and said, hey, your son's having some issues. He needs your help. And he didn't judge. He didn't question. He didn't say why. He just said, oh, snap, my son's in trouble. Right. And he showed up.
That's a beautiful thing.
He showed up at my doorstep. And it's crazy because for years, I had a lot of animosity towards him. I had a lot of I don't want to use the word hate because I've never felt like I hated my father. I just had animosity and resentment towards him.
Of course.
Because he wasn't physically there. As a man, we need our dads, right?
Of course.
And he wasn't there for a lot of my life. Like, he didn't teach me how to ride a bike. He didn't teach me how to play baseball, even though baseball is my favorite sport. I had to learn it all by myself. He didn't really do things that dads are supposed to do with their sons. He didn't teach me how to shave. He didn't give me any advice about relationships with women. A lot of that stuff came from my mother. So my mom kind of played like the mom and dad role. Right. But, my mom was also recovering from trauma from her childhood, also with the problems that she went through with my dad. My dad was abusive in the relationship only when he was intoxicated, because my father was a heavy drinker. Right. So when my father was sober, he had to hear a lot of stuff from my mom because, my mom was like constantly in his ear, like, you did this to me, you did that to me. But, he only would react to it when he was intoxicated and, get physical and physically abusive with her. So with the fact that I looked so much like my dad, especially as a child, now we look a little different because my father doesn't have a beard and my father doesn't have the hairstyle that I have. But, if you see a picture of my dad and if you see a picture of me, you can see the resemblance. But as a child, I looked a lot like my dad. So it was also very difficult for my mom to raise me. Mm-hmm. And I understand the mental health aspect of it because she kept seeing my dad, the man that abused her, the man who treated her bad, the man who constantly cheated, the man who hurt her so many times. So there was actually a time that my mom treated me bad and she was resenting me.
Just because you look like your father.
Yeah, just like and I'm my mother's third child. And you know what's so crazy about that, Andrew, is that fast forward, I'm a 40-year-old man now. My mom is 67. I am my mother's favorite child. She has 4 kids. I mean, I know she loves my sister to death because that's her only only daughter, and she always wanted a daughter. But the one that she vents to the most, the one that she talks to the most, the one that she bothers the most and is constantly reaching out to for anything is me.
Well, it seems like you've taken action. I can't speak on behalf of your siblings, but to actually do something about mental health, just this podcast alone, that speaks volumes about your character.
Yeah. So, I remember telling my mom in a conversation one time, and it didn't go well because obviously it triggered her. But I remember saying to her, hey, Mom, I remember when there was a time that you would say to me that you hated me. You told me that you wished that you would have aborted me or you never gave birth to me. Mm-hmm. I remember there was a time that you just literally could not stand me and you couldn't look at my face and you kept projecting and projecting and projecting onto me everything that my father did. So I was paying for something that was not my fault. I never asked to be brought into this world. Right. And, as I started to develop, instead of you appreciating that your son was developing and turning into a young man, you couldn't appreciate it. You couldn't enjoy it. You couldn't be motherly enough to nurture me the way you were supposed to, saying, hey, he's not a baby anymore. Now he's getting older. Look, now he's talking. Now he feeds himself. Now he's dressing himself up. Now he's asking me questions, things that he didn't do as a baby. I told her, unfortunately, you couldn't do those things because the only thing at the time was your resentment.
Yeah.
And, she got emotional. She got upset. She said, why did you bring that up? And my mom's very confrontational. So, I just tried to de-escalate the situation as much as I could. until eventually she calmed down. I mean, eventually the way she calmed down was she just walked away. She didn't talk to me for like a few days.
Right.
But I said, look, this is who she is. This is her cope. This is how she copes. This is how she reacts.
Right.
I went to school for psychology. A lot of people don't know that about me. A lot of people think that because I'm a businessman, I got a master's degree or whatever in business, which I don't have that. I actually have an associate's in human services and psychology because I went to school for psychology. I went to school for psychology because even though at the time when I was in college, I was mad at the world. I had a chip on my shoulder. I blamed everybody for everything. Didn't know what accountability was, right? Just mad at the world, just the angry man. And you, I'm sure you know how it feels to be an angry man from Brooklyn.
100%.
Coming from Brooklyn, So
losing both of my parents 79 days apart, yeah, there was some justified anger in there.
Exactly. So I was just questioning everything, mad at God sometimes, and just saying, why would you put me through this? Why the hell did you? I didn't sign up for this. I didn't ask. I didn't ask to be brought into this world. So why are you punishing me? Why are you making me go through this? Mm-hmm. And at the time, I didn't know what resilience was. I didn't know what overcoming things was. I didn't know what adversity was. I didn't know any of that. I just thought that I was just being bullied by God himself. Right. That's how I personally felt. And I remember saying that to
heavily.
Yeah, and I remember saying that to a therapist, and my therapist goes, "Wow, I don't think I've ever heard somebody say the words, I felt bullied by God." Right. And I was like, yeah, because what the hell? Why is this all happening to me? Like, why did I have to go through all these stupid things?
Right.
And then I saw the stories of so many people, so many like celebrities, public figures, Michael Jackson, number one person, right? Like, look at the childhood that he went through, right? Unfortunately. And look at the guy that he became. Mm-hmm. And I unintentionally signed up, I had to go to college. So I unintentionally signed up for mental health. And the only reason why I signed up for mental health is because my uncle, who's schizophrenic, at the time, I was just very curious as to what it was that he had, because we saw what he was doing. We saw how he was acting, and everybody kept talking about he's crazy. Because that's the first thing. I mean, so especially like Latin households, Caribbean households, this is how they refer to it. When somebody has any type of situation or dilemma, it's automatically considered, oh, they're crazy.
Italian households are the same. I grew up in same
exactly. That's the only word that could come out of their mouth. They can't say like, oh, he's challenged, she's going through something. There might be they're mentally exhausted. No, the word is always the word crazy. Right. And I just kept hearing crazy all over. And this is my late aunt's husband. She passed away in 2021. And 2022, she passed away. And he literally, I know him all my life. And now all of a sudden he's changing. He's this whole different person. And I'm like, what is going on with him? So I remember when it was time to go to college, I wanted to be a lawyer so bad. And somebody talked to me about law school, and somebody like kind of talked me out of it. Like, hey, listen, I would love for you to go to college and become a lawyer, but it's a long time. You're going to be in there 8 years or something, and you got to go take the bar exam and this and this and this. And you really want to do that? And at the time, I don't know why. I just wanted to find something a little bit more easier, but at the same time, still challenging, because I don't think that going to school for mental health is less than going to school to get to take the bar exam. I think they're very demanding and challenging careers.
Of course.
So long story short, I went to school for psychology, and I was able to learn about mental health. I was able to learn about the human mind and dementia and Alzheimer's and bipolarness and also schizophrenia. Right. And I'm like, oh my God, do you know that a lot of people back in the day were schizophrenic, and people just didn't know? They didn't have a name at the time. So eventually,
same thing with autism.
Exactly, autism. Yeah. Autism has been around forever.
Right.
And people are making such a big deal about it now. And I'm like, yeah, because I guess people are more educated now. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? About the whole thing. Right. So, I always took those things serious, and I just always had more compassion, more empathy, more understanding. And people said to me, why don't you become a therapist? Why don't you become this? I was like, you know what? Like, honestly, I took a different route. I went to school for that, but then I ended up becoming a businessman and entrepreneur. But I always still kept it in the rear end. I always kept like psychology in the rear end. It actually, it follows us in everyday life. you know, I'm always dealing with a challenge. I work with a lot of people. And what that means is I work with a lot of personalities.
Mm-hmm.
And not everybody's just like me, and not everybody's just like you.
Correct.
And, you know, I had those challenges like you was talking about before, where once I started to realize how people are, I'm like, why are they like that? Why do they talk like that? Why are they conniving? Why are they backstabbing? Why did they just do that? Why did they just lie to that person in their face and shook their hand as they walked away?
Right.
You know? And these are endless conversations. These are endless topics, you know, things that we never really will get an answer to.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, so far, you know, I'm kind of like, you know, this is the first time you and I actually have a conversation. I've never spoken to you on the phone before. It's the first time I see you in flesh, and first time we're having a conversation. But, you know, we've been on this episode for about 20 something minutes in now. And I feel like I know so much about you already without you even finishing, you know, the top, you know, the icing on the cake. So let's talk about your book.
Okay.
Which I love the title.
Thank you.
Your book, Fatally Resilient, carries such a powerful title. So my question to you is, what was the defining moment in your life where you realized that resilience was no longer just survival, but part of your identity?
I'm going to have to say probably the second time I got cancer. Because the first time I got cancer, you know, everybody's there for you. Everybody's, you know, gung-ho, we'll support, you know, yada, yada, yada. But the second time, which was 22 months later, same thing came back. It wasn't a new diagnosis. And nobody was there. Like, sure enough, like I filled out, or I employed a GoFundMe. People donated, but I'd much
Were you
rather
in Vegas
have...
at the time?
Yes.
Were you in
I've
Vegas
been in
at the time
Vegas
when you
since
got cancer?
2001.
Okay.
But there's no substitute for somebody being there, which all of my family lives on the East Coast. All of them. At least back then they did. I have a couple of family members now just in case. But when I realized then, I realized like there's nobody coming to help me. There's nobody coming to make this better for me. Like, I can't tell you how many times I drove myself to the hospital with psychosis from the chemotherapy because there just wasn't anybody there.
Wow.
And then, you know, I came out of it and I realized, you know, fatally resilient to the point where I might die. That's really what the title means. Fatally until death, resilient, don't give up ever. And until I die, I will not give up. Even if that includes driving myself to... I shouldn't have driven them. I'll admit that. But one scene in my book, the opening scene, I woke up with sepsis one day. And if the viewers don't know what sepsis is, it's an infection that starts out somewhere and it winds up going to your brain. And it's extremely tumultuous. You're talking body temperatures of like 104 plus degrees Fahrenheit, hallucinations. And I walked to the hospital with no shoes on my feet, no wallet, no glasses, no phone. I left the door to my apartment wide open because there just wasn't anybody there. So that's when I, like, you know, once I was able to process all that, which I always did with the help of a therapist. I don't go through anything alone. I want to make that very clear. I always process things with the therapist.
That's good.
That's when I realized that, like, it's all on my shoulders. Nobody's coming to save me.
That's the truth. Nobody in physical form is coming to save you, you know, but I believe that, I mean, I'm not sure if you agree with me on this, Andrew, but I feel that eventually God shows us the way. He shows us the light, you know. I remember when, like I said to you earlier, that I had my moments when I was younger where I hated everything, and I blamed God for everything, and I kept asking him, why are you making me go through this? I remember eventually what happened was one day I'm sure, obviously, you being from Brooklyn, do you remember the Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir?
Yes, I do actually.
So they're actually located downtown Brooklyn. And, you know, they always sang these beautiful Christian songs, right? And I remember they had a gentleman on the Brooklyn, and I never saw the physical video because a lot of these were just like on YouTube, and it was just a song. I don't know if I ever got the chance to see the physical video, but there was a gentleman that apparently had been saved by Jesus, and he unfortunately passed away after that. But he was able to say that when he gave himself to Jesus, all the stuff that happened to him just went away.
Right.
He said that he was on the street screaming at people, cursing people out. He felt like there was demons after him. I think he even said that he was, questioning his sexuality at the time.
Right.
And he was in the hospital. Apparently he was dying. He was in the hospital. He was dying. And he screamed apparently to Jesus and said, help me, help me. And then he said that he eventually felt like, the pain going away, and he felt the healing process of everything.
Right.
And once he felt all of that, he felt saved by God, and he gave his soul to the Lord, and he just started going out there and helping people and showing people that what he went through, similar like what you and I are doing right now, that what we went through, there's millions of people out there that went through the same thing as us.
Right.
And what we want to let them know is, like you mentioned earlier, you're not alone.
Not alone.
Because a lot of people will feel, at some point in your life, you felt that you was alone. And then you mentioned, now I'm not alone because I have a therapist. Same thing with me. I used to talk to everybody. The only person that never made me feel alone was my grandmother. And Andrew, I don't know if you know much about my grandma, but I talk about my grandma a lot because my grandmother was the most special person in my life, the greatest person to ever live in my life. And she's part of the reason why I created this podcast. This is me giving back. This is me helping people learn what resilience is. Right. And I feel like my grandmother was very resilient. And my grandmother, this is my mom's mom, passed away at 91 from dementia.
Wow. But
she had the answers to everything, Andrew. She had the answers to she was like a doctor. For every pain, every symptom, she always had a prescription for it,
Yeah, she always had the remedy.
She always had the remedy. And, when my grandmother passed away, man, of course, I initially was like, damn, the most important person died, because I remember preparing myself for it. And then at the same time, not wanting to prepare myself for it, because I was like, I can't prepare myself for this lady to pass away. I can't look at that casket when she's in there. Right. And I had no choice. I did all those things. I had to go through it. I lived through it. And that was in 2019. That was before the pandemic, December. And then fast forward a few years later, as I talk about it, as I do acts of service, as I created this podcast and went through certain battles, in 2023, I met someone who I wanted to marry. And in 2024, her and I broke up. And this is the reason why I started the Resilient Podcast. I always kept saying, man, Grandma, I wish you was here. I wish that what would you say to me right now, Grandma, if you was alive? And when I turned 40, one of the first things I did was I went to the cemetery, which is not too far from my house in Brooklyn. I'm sure you know where Greenwood Cemetery is. Yeah. And that's where she is. And I had to just talk to her. And, the thing is, she's buried next to my aunt is actually buried next to her, because they buried my aunt after her. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I feel bad because it's like, I got to acknowledge that my aunt is there too. But it's like, sometimes I'm really mainly talking more to my grandma.
Right.
Because it was her burial plot first. Right. And, I've told my therapist, I've told people I've been in relationships with and friends, like, hey, ever since my grandmother passed, she hasn't spoken to me. I mean, she showed up in dreams. I was like, well, what kind of dreams are you having with her? I was like, dreams that she was alive, dreams that she never got sick, dreams that she overcame her sickness and came back to a normal life. And they're like, wow, that's interesting. And I was like, well, maybe some of the things that you go through in life, maybe some of the resilience that you go through in life, don't you think that that's maybe your grandma and God talking together to you? And I was like, it's a possibility. I look forward for the day that I can, just like you see in the movies sometimes, I look forward to the day that I can hear my grandmother's voice again. Right. And because it's been such a long time since I heard her voice, and feel something that's coming from her. You know what I'm saying?
One thing I'd like to share with you, and we don't have to talk about it now. We can talk about it after. But one thing my therapist shared with me is an exercise called Calm Safe Place. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. But essentially what it is you do a grounding exercise to a place that was special to you and your grandmother. So with your eyes closed, you go, 5 things you can hear, 5 things you can feel, uh, 5 things you can touch, and then you envision the person coming to you.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it takes practice. I thought it was ridiculous at first, but I can talk to my father that way. I can't do it with my mother for some reason. I don't know why, but I have a very easy time talking to my father. And it's just like you said, like my father comes and he tells me things that I don't know. Like it's not coming from my own mind what my father tells me.
Mm-hmm.
So like I was anti-God, anti-spirituality for such a long time. But how else do you explain that? How else do you explain a thought that's not mine coming into my head from my father just from thinking about it?
Wow.
You know what I mean?
You know, it's crazy. I have something to tell you about that. A while ago, this was several years ago, actually. I remember someone talking. It was somewhere on social media that I heard it for the first time, and I played it a few times. Now I don't even know where I can find it, but there was a voice one time on social media that I think it was a female that said, a lot of people don't believe in God, but why is it that when the word God is said, or we talk about Jesus or whatever, it feels like a light bulb lights up in your head? Why is it that when we say the word God, something in that brain, like,
something above you,
you feel something. You feel like a spark. You feel like some type of feeling. So it's like, if God didn't exist, why do we feel that inside of our head? Why does that bulb go on? Why do we know what God is the minute people talk about it? So, you talked about your parents passing away 79 days apart.
Yeah, in 2014.
Who passed away first?
My father was September 16th, 2014, and then my mother was December 4th, 2014.
December 4th?
Yeah.
Wow. And my grandmother passed away December 5th, 2019. She passed away on my sister's birthday. I mean, it's crazy because, my sister had just went to the hospital. She, I told you before, she had her dementia battle. Right. And the doctors told us like a little after Thanksgiving that she wasn't going to make it past Christmas. And my sister went to the hospital that day. The hospice where my grandmother was at. And she was one of the last ones to say goodbye to her, because I had a cousin who was physically in the room as well, too, watching her till her very last moment. Mm-hmm. But my sister had went to her, said hello to her, told her, hey, grandma, whatever you do, just don't pass away on my birthday. Okay. I mean, it's my birthday today. And it's sad. Like as soon as my sister left, my grandmother took her last breath. Yeah. And she passed away. And when my mom got that phone call, and then my mom told me, and then my mom told my sister lost it because my sister's like, oh my God, the one thing I told her was don't pass away on my birthday. And look, she passes away on my birthday. And it's crazy because I said to my sister, well, look, everything happens for a reason. My grandmother's name is Aura, A-U-R-A. And there was so many female cousins and, my sister in the family. And my grandmother had, what is it, 4 granddaughters? 4 granddaughters before my sister was born.
Right.
And she didn't think to call any of those granddaughters Aura. She waited until my mom gave birth to my sister. And she calls my sister Aura. Now there's 4 Auras in the family because my grandmother's the first one.
Right.
My sister's the second one. I have a cousin named Kimberly. Well, her middle name is Kimberly, and she's Aura Kimberly. And then her sister, Aura Gabriella, they both live in Florida. And my sister's technically like, the first Aura after my grandmother. So everybody's like, isn't that crazy? Right. That 4 Auras all of a sudden. I was like, well, yeah, what happened was my mom had her. And then my uncle, which is my mom's brother, got jealous and said, I'm going to call my if I have 2 daughters, I'm going to call all my daughters Aura. So, yeah. So my uncle because my uncle got into it with my grandmother and he goes, I'm older than my sister. So my kids should have more priority. Why is it that my sister, I'm like, well, you don't have any daughters. You don't have any. And it's true. He didn't have any daughters at the time. My cousin, Kimberly, wasn't born until after my sister was born. So she's like, if you had daughters, maybe I would have called them Aura too. But, she came first, you
Right.
know? But just talking to you about these things, it's crazy. Like, the fact that your parents passed away 79 days apart, and you was 14 at the time, you say, Andrew, when this
No,
happened?
I was 24.
24.
I was 24, and then my mother died. No, how old was I? I was 26, and then I turned 27 3 days before my mother died. So she almost died on my birthday. She died the day after my ex-wife's birthday.
Oh,
So
I
similar
see.
story to what you got going on.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, these numbers mean something. I always
Right.
tell people these numbers mean something. So, Andrew, it is the month of June. It is Men's Health Month. And my next question to you is, so many men are taught to suppress emotions and push through pain silently. During Men's Health Month, what message would you give to men who are struggling internally but are afraid to speak up or seek help?
First and foremost, it's okay. It's okay to struggle. And granted, you have to be, in the presence of a person in order to create that rapport with them.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, it's okay. Like, it's okay to not feel okay. It's okay to
Mm-hmm.
ask for help. And at the same time, you kind of have to ask where these feelings are coming from, because it's not the gentleman who's projecting that onto themselves. It's
Mm-hmm.
society projecting it onto them.
Yep.
So what's the point? So that's really it. It's like, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to not be okay. And
Mm-hmm.
find yourself a group of people who have either struggled through what you're struggling through currently, or
Mm-hmm.
just people who are open to listening to you, people who you can trust. And I know this is a very advanced concept to a degree, but once a man can get over what it is that plagues him, that trauma becomes an asset. Um, I know might sound ridiculous, but everything that I've been through, it started out with addiction, and then my parents died, and then a
Mm-hmm.
divorce, and then a custody battle, and then I
Mm-hmm.
lost my home, I lost this, I lost that, I got cancer twice, and all that did, now that I'm on the other side of it, is it equipped me to be there for somebody who's going through it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not possible if I don't face it first.
Mm-hmm.
If I treat it like the way it's worded in the question, where if I just try to pretend it's not happening, or try to stuff it down deep down, I'm of no use to my fellow man. And that's really what it's all about. Like, I love my fellow man. I'm not afraid to say that.
I hear you. Andrew, so you mentioned having cancer twice, right? How old were you the first time you had cancer?
The first time I was 34. Second
Uh-huh.
time I was 36.
Okay, so literally like a year and a half later,
About 22 months apart.
22 months apart. So,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're cancer free right now, right?
Yeah.
Congratulations on surviving. Thank you for still being here with us. Thank you for not giving up, like you mentioned before.
Of course.
I've had my share of people with cancer. I just lost my uncle literally 2 days. Was it 2 days before no, it was actually 2 days before my father's birthday.
I'm sorry.
So my father turned 75 in April 22. April 30th. My grandmother's April 22nd. I'm getting my dates confused here. My grandmother's a Taurus. I'm a Taurus. My father's a Taurus, but they're the early Taurus. So my grandmother's April 22nd, which happens to be Earth Day. A lot of people don't know that. And I think it's very significant that my grandmother was born on Earth Day, being someone who cared so much about the earth and the world. So my father turned 75 April 30th, and his brother passed away, my uncle, 85. And he passed away from cancer. We've had a lot of cancer in our family. I've known a lot of people with cancer. My aunt that I mentioned to you before, with the uncle, with the husband that's schizophrenic, she's a cancer survivor a few times, breast cancer and whatnot.
Yeah.
I've lost some young friends that I grew up with to cancer, and people that I cared about. I actually, one time there was a woman that I was romantically in love with a long time ago. She passed away from cancer.
Wow.
And, it was just devastating.
Right.
I hate, if I can use the word hate, I'll use it properly. I hate cancer. I think cancer is terrible. But in the same light, I have to give thanks and gratitude for those that survived.
Right.
Because I could only imagine what you went through. You mentioned chemo. You mentioned all these things that you went through. I can imagine, Andrew, how you felt exactly when you had it. You probably felt less than shell of your shell of yourself. I think you felt like hopeless.
Worthless.
I mean,
worthless was the big one.
Worthless.
Because,
is it fair?
Okay.
Yeah. Is it fair to say, Andrew, that at some points you probably wanted just for things to end just like that, so you could just stop suffering?
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, I never had any intention of killing myself. I never had a plan or anything, but when in my book I talk about the second time I got cancer, the chemo regimen was so much more intense than the first one that after my first week, I was just laying in my bed with psychosis. And I was just laying there with nobody to come check on me. And I was just laying there for days, just puking off the side of my bed. And of course, the thought dawned upon me, like, I wouldn't mind if I just went to sleep and didn't wake up. But as far as like suicidal ideation, no, never like that.
Yeah, I'm glad that those are never thoughts in your mind. But overall, like I said, thank you for putting up the fight. Thank you for becoming a champion. You were resilient before you knew it.
Right.
And I feel like maybe your folks, up in heaven were there with you, during that entire process, because I'm sure you spoke to both of them a lot during those 2 times.
They absolutely were.
Yeah. So far, this episode is really interesting. To hear your story, Andrew, is truly amazing. And I feel like I'm going to learn a lot from you, because we still have a little bit more left of this episode. But so far, just hearing your story, I feel like I've known you for like a million years, even though we don't know each other at all. It's probably the Brooklyn connection, the Brooklyn chemistry.
Although you're not a Knicks fan, I have a bit of a problem with that. But
listen, the Knicks are doing good right now, right? And I'm a Nets fan because Brooklyn, but it's like the Mets and the Yankees. I'm a Yankees fan by heart, but if the Mets are involved and they're doing good, I cheer for the Mets too. Right. Same thing with the Giants and the Jets. Even though I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan. But if the Giants and the Jets are in the playoffs, if they're doing really good, I'm rooting for them. Even the Buffalo Bills, because they're from New York.
Right.
So the Knicks, I'm really happy for them. I'm really happy for the Knicks, really am, and I can't wait to see the outcome of this. What I'm saying, with the Spurs, but the Knicks are doing great, and it's a long time, right? It's a long time.
56 years, I think.
Yeah.
Like that.
I've been to Madison Square Garden so many times. I think was it my first basketball game? I don't know if it was my first basketball game. I may be right. I think my first basketball game was the Knicks game, and it was the Knicks and the Hawks, and it was the end of the season, and the Knicks were already out of the playoffs anyways. But it was like, I think maybe their final home game against the Atlanta Hawks, and the Knicks won. And I remember when I was a teenager, we did a tour. I think it was from my school, and we went to the locker, and Patrick Ewing, they showed us his shoe, and his shoe was so big, and I'm like, man, hey, he was one of the greatest Knicks of all time. But
he's my favorite player of all time.
Yeah, there you go. Shout out to the Knicks real quick, because the Knicks are doing really good in New York. I'm sure that Andrew would love to be in New York right now because of everything that's going on.
Right.
But folks, it's been a great conversation so far. I still have a few more questions to ask Andrew, but we're going to take a quick break. But before we do, I wanted to take a moment to give a shout out to the folks out at NalaHealth.com, which is right here on the screen. Nala Health, Victor Melgar, holistic medicine. It's crazy. I'm meeting Andrew now, but I wish I knew Andrew then, because if I did, during his cancer situation, we probably could have helped Andrew heal quicker with Nala products. Right. So, folks, when you visit the Nala website, which is right here, NalaHealth.com, everything that's on that website, 10% off when you use the code TRP10, which is right here on the screen. And it's not a first time purchase code. It's a code that you can use every single time you want to get something. Just for listening and watching this podcast, you receive 10% discount off of that. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back and we'll continue this conversation with Andrew. All right, we are back on the Resilient Podcast, episode 58, with the one and only Andrew Minuto, the author of a book that I believe is going to be my favorite book at some point, Fatally Resilient. You know, we've been talking about
it, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We've been talking about resiliency. We've been talking about equanimity. We've been talking about men's health overall. Andrew is a proud cancer survivor. Like I told Andrew before, I'm thankful that he's here. I'm thankful that he's here to deliver this message that cancer didn't take him away from us, and he was able to write this book. I don't think Andrew was thinking about writing a book when he was going through cancer. I mean, I may be wrong, but the fact of the matter is, everything that Andrew's endured in life brought him to where he is today, right now, at this moment. And he chooses to be resilient. He chooses to be a positive person. He could have been angry at the world. He could have been blaming everybody for everything, but he's not doing that. He's not doing that. Andrew's been through a lot of battles. His parents passed away, had a divorce, custody battle, things that I don't know about, but I always hear friends and my family members that have been through it and stuff. Custody battles is not easy. Divorces are not easy. I almost married somebody a few years ago. I was getting ready to propose. It was the first step into marrying them, was to propose to them. I never got the chance to do that because by the time that I wanted to propose to this person, we were not together anymore. So I had to learn the hard way that things are going to happen the way they're supposed to happen. And you can't really control things in life, So my next question to you is, when life tests us emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, what practices or habits have helped you maintain peace within yourself instead of allowing chaos to consume you?
You just touched on it a little bit when you said about what's in your control. Now, the most effective practice I learned, and I learned this in therapy, I learned this in inpatient treatment, is one has to learn where that line is drawn in the sand that separates what's in one's control from what's not in one's control.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as one does everything that's in their control, then the outcome is going to either be a desirable one or something you can learn from.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes certain characteristics, certain qualities in order to learn. You need humility, you need to be open-minded, and you need to be honest with yourself, most importantly. Because one of my biggest issues was I would keep making the same mistake over and over and over again. And it's because I wasn't willing to look at my role in it. I wasn't looking that I was trying to control something that I'm not meant to control. And since pride and ego got in the way, I deprived myself of ever seeing the inherent lesson in what I was supposed to learn. So just to summarize, the best possible thing is to just learn where that line is drawn and keep a positive mind. Don't try to control what's not in your control. Do everything you can for what's in your control. Don't get me wrong. Just to give you an example, when I came back from treatment, I knew I was going to be losing my career as a teacher because I got a polysubstance DUI on the way home from school. And for whatever reason, I thought it would be a grand idea to be honest with the cops and tell them everything I had ever done. And since I was a state employee, naturally that gets on the desk of, the important people of the state. So I wound up losing my job. But in the interim, that's when I was learning to find out where that line was drawn. Part of me wanted to find out who was making the decision, send flowers to that person, send a letter to that person, try to work my way out of it, weasel my way out of it. And then between treatment and therapy and the 12-step, I learned that I'm not meant to be doing that. I'm meant to be taking whatever the outcome is, because I created this. This is 100% my fault. Nobody did this to me. And that's really what it comes down to is how much a man is willing to blame himself. And a lot of it is pride and ego. And, going back to what you said about social norms, about not asking for help and whatnot. But in order to improve, that pride and ego has to be set aside.
Yeah.
Humility is what separates a man from making the same mistake more than once.
Yeah, and accountability as well too.
Right. Absolutely.
Taking accountability. Accountability is very important.
Right. I would say. Okay.
What were you gonna say?
I was going to say that if you make a mistake more than once, it's a choice. That's my view on things. If you make the same mistake more than once, it's a choice.
Yeah, like you're intentionally knowing what you're doing, so
right.
It's a choice. It's not a mistake anymore. It's just a choice that you keep making.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was the worst. I was very guilty of that, but I learned to stop doing that.
That's good. That's good. You took accountability.
Yeah.
You did a lot of self-reflecting and you took accountability.
Right. And a lot of that has to do with my daughter because, the word integrity pops up a lot in line with resilience. And I always ask myself, if my daughter were watching me right now, am I setting the right example for her?
Mm-hmm.
Or would she be ashamed of whatever I'm doing right now?
Mm-hmm. How old is your daughter?
She's 9.
She's 9.
So I try my best to set the proper example for her.
That's good.
Teach her accountability, teach her to always, she's a very compassionate individual. She has a very big heart, loves to help. I was very fortunate with my daughter.
There you go. She probably gets that from her dad. Yeah. Speaking about like the young life, your daughter is 9 years old. So my next question to you is, looking back at the younger version of you, let's say, for example, 9-year-old Andrew, the version that was still learning life, pain, and purpose, what would you tell him now, knowing everything you've endured and overcame?
If that version of me would even listen to what I have to say, I would tell him, figure out who you are, and nobody can tell you who to be anymore.
I like that.
Because that was how my life was run. And again, it's nothing malicious against anybody else. It's just I never had the, emotional strength to figure out who I was. I was very codependent as a child, very sensitive as a child. So I always relied on other people's validation and whatnot to tell me who I was.
I see. A lot of us go through that. Men especially. Men go through that a lot.
So when I got to college and I went from ranked 7th in my high school class to the architecture program at UNLV. And it's not even remotely close to the same type of instruction as public school. It's show up on day 1. They give you your project. We'll see you in 30 days when you're ready to present. I wasn't equipped for that. I didn't have the social maturity for that. And that's why I failed out so quickly, because I didn't know who I was. And at that age, education wasn't, we pushed education in my family, but nobody was like, my parents weren't PhDs. My mother graduated from high school. My father had a little bit of college, but at some point in high school, it became at the point where they couldn't help me with my schoolwork anymore. So I'm all alone. And me being me at 19, 20 years old, I'm not going to ask for help. I'm just not going to go.
Yeah.
And then that ensued the identity crisis because I wasn't getting that validation from my parents anymore. I had no idea who I was. And that's when drugs really became prominent in my life.
Yeah. I hear you on that. My next question to you is about equanimity. So in your opinion, what is the difference between simply surviving trauma and truly healing from it? And do you believe that equanimity plays a role in the healing process?
Absolutely. We touched on this a couple of questions ago, but simply surviving trauma is exactly what I mentioned earlier about how you are very likely to repeat the same mistake again, or at least put yourself in a similar position to experience trauma again if you're not open to whatever the lesson was. So really, it comes back to the honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness in whatever you're facing, and applying that to the problem, learning what you can from it, and ensuring it doesn't happen again. That's healing.
Mm-hmm.
The opposite is just, ignoring it, which I did from birth until 31 years old. My coping mechanism was avoidance, denial and avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so bad that even when I was married, like, I couldn't bring myself to check the mail. I would go to the mailbox and grab the mail and just throw it right in the garbage because I couldn't face any of the damage that I did, uh,
Wow.
because of how irresponsible I was,
Mm,
how not holding myself accountable for anything.
mm,
And all that turns back to, and this is the central theme of, like, if you would ask me what the turning point was in my life, it was realizing that I have a raging fear of inadequacy.
mm,
Everything that's ever been wrong in my life touches back to a fear of inadequacy. Me thinking I'm not good enough. That's why I always
mm,
required my parents' validation. After they passed away, that's why I required my wife's validation. And then when drugs came a part of the system again and the wife left, all of a sudden I have nothing anymore. I have nobody
mm,
to rely on. I have nobody to be codependent on. So when I got out of jail for that polysubstance DUI, my friend picked me up and he said, "You got two options." He said, "You can either get on a plane and fly to treatment in New Jersey, or you can get out of my car." And I tried to work in all kinds of third options, don't get me wrong, but eventually I figured it out and I said, "No, I'll go. I'll go." Once I realized that I am out of options, like, literally, like, learning that you have no option other than being on the streets is a major wake up call.
mhm.
I couldn't go home. I couldn't go back to my friend's house. There was nowhere for me to go. So I took the help that was offered to me.
That's good. I'm glad that you took the help that was offered to you.
Mhm.
So, we're on the Resilient podcast and we've been talking about resilience. Um, and you are the author of Fatally Resilient. So my question to you is, what does resilience mean to you, Andrew?
At its rawest level, resilience is just not giving up. It is doing everything you have to do, not just to survive through something, but to learn what the inherent lesson is. Because, the last question that you asked me is, what's the difference between surviving trauma and healing from it? And that question lends itself to this one. There were multiple times when my life was broken beyond repair,
Mm-hmm.
and resilience wasn't a part of my vocabulary because there was always somebody to fight my battles for me. My
Mm-hmm.
parents when they were alive, my siblings when they still lived here, my wife before she left, and then when that last bout with addiction came, all that disappeared. There was no safety net anymore. So that's really what it comes down to. Um, Doing what you have to do to survive, but also ensuring that you don't repeat the same mistake again.
Yeah.
Everything in life is a learning experience. It's just a
Of
matter of
course.
if you're open to learning it.
Exactly. So, you talked about broken beyond repair. So there are moments in life where people do feel broken beyond repair. So is it fair to ask you, was there ever a moment where you questioned your own strength? And if so, what ultimately brought you back to yourself?
There were three periods of time I can think of. One was when um, I mentioned it earlier, but when I first started failing out of college, and I fell into hard drugs. The second one was when my parents, right after my mother died, because, like, my father died, and then something over that next 3 months, it just my it just went like that. I don't have the words to describe it, but I went from, like, decent to just nothing.
Mm.
And then the last one was when I was sitting on a detoxing on a jail cell floor at Clark County Detention Center
Oh,
with
wow.
absolutely nobody coming for me. I didn't even make a phone call. There was
Wow.
nobody for me to call. I didn't even attempt to.
Hmm.
And the commonality behind all of those is what I said earlier, what I would say to myself if I met a younger version of myself. Figure out who you are, and nobody can tell you who to be anymore. All of
Mhm.
that happened, tracing it back to an identity issue. I never knew who I was. So I was either the person my parents wanted to be, I was the person my wife wanted me to be, I was the person my siblings wanted to be, and none of that jived with me because it's not me.
Mhm.
And then it sucks to say this, but I had to lose everything in order to understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm grateful for it. Don't get me wrong. I'm
Mhm.
very grateful because um, one of the dedication at the beginning of my book, I dedicate the book to my ex-wife,
Mhm.
and I tell her that because we don't have the best of relationships. And I'm not trying to talk bad about her. She's an excellent mother. That's not my intention. But we have a very transactional co-parenting relationship,
I see.
and I thanked her for leaving me because if
Wow.
she hadn't left me, I'd still be the same person I was before,
Wow.
knowing that I would have one more opportunity to mess something up.
Wow. That's deep.
Yeah.
That's very deep. So, Andrew, I have two more questions to ask you, but
Mhm.
before I ask you those two questions, like I said, it's been such a interesting topic. It's been very like I like this conversation. I like having conversations with people like this.
Thank you.
Again, you coming on the show today really, really makes me happy that I have this podcast, that I have this platform for people to share their stories.
Thank you.
But before I ask you the last two questions, folks, I wanted to quickly, Andrew, I don't know if you're a coffee lover. I mean, you're from Brooklyn, so I think you are a coffee
Mhm.
lover. I mean, I
I'll
don't know how
drink
the
it as
coffee.
long as it's cold.
Okay, there you go. So you like cold coffee. So
Yeah.
I want to take this moment to give a shout out to our other sponsor, Matty Rocks Coffee. Link is right here on the screen. Some of the best coffee in the world. Andrew, I'm going to make sure that we send some coffee over to you.
Thank you.
My business partner, Matty, goes to Vegas a lot. So I don't know, maybe the next time he's out in Vegas, maybe he could just hand deliver one to you.
Of
But
course.
folks, when you listen or watch the Resilient Podcast, this link right here on the screen, you receive 10% with the code TRP10 when you purchase Matty Rocks coffee, whether it's cold brew, whether it's hot coffee, whatever the case may be, iced coffee, TRP10 is the code and you receive 10%. Andrew, before we end this episode, I wanted to ask you, can you please share with everyone where they can reach out to you, where they can find you? And we'll be having the link of Andrew's book right here, which is available on Amazon. Is it just available on Amazon, Andrew, or is it available on other platforms as well too?
Just Amazon right now.
Okay, so
I'm working on doing an audiobook, recording it myself just to give it some authenticity. And then once I do that, I'm going to try and get on Apple Books.
Okay, so folks, the link is right here on the screen. Click on this link and it will take you to Andrew's book, and make sure you purchase it. Hopefully eventually in the near future, there'll be an opportunity where Andrew could sign some copies. I definitely want to make sure that my copy is signed by Andrew as well. And also a photo opportunity too. But yeah, Andrew, thank you again for creating this book.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
One thing that I want to mention real quick is I really appreciate you having me on the show. And given that it is mental or Men's Mental Health Month, I just want to vow that if you ever need anything from me from the point of men's mental health, I'm there for you. You have my cell phone number. And the same can go for anybody who watches the show. My email is andrew.minuto, minuto @gmail.com.
Right here on the screen.
Right. If you're ever suffering, just reach out to me. There's not many things you're going through that I haven't been through, and I can help you navigate them.
I appreciate that, Andrew. Thank you for sharing that moment with us. So folks can find you on social media, right?
Yes.
Okay, so where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, Andrew J. Minuto on Facebook.
Okay.
And then on Instagram, I think it's Andrew.Minuto.
Yep. Right here on the screen.
Yeah, Andrew.Minuto.
There you go. So it's been a great episode with Andrew. Sometimes these episodes, I try to keep them short, but this one has been a little lengthy, but it's been lengthy with a purpose.
Right.
So, Andrew, I've been sharing things about myself with you. You've obviously shared a lot with us today.
Mm-hmm.
And people are listening and people are watching this episode right now. So for someone listening right now, somebody listening or watching right now who feels emotionally exhausted, mentally drained, or defeated by life circumstances, what advice would you give them about finding peace in the middle of the storm?
It goes back to what I said earlier about finding where that line is drawn. That's what's in your control and what's not in your control. Because nothing good comes from trying to control what's not in your control. And by definition, because you tried to control something that's not in your control and you fail, technically it's your fault because you did it. That's something that it took me a while to understand. And the overall like theme of what I'm saying here is that working on yourself hurts. It's not easy. There's a reason not many people do it. There's a reason not many people can introspect. There's a reason not many people can take an honest look at themselves. But in all reality, all you're doing is trading short-term discomfort in exchange for long-term satisfaction, as opposed to ignoring your problems, enjoying that short-term satisfaction in exchange for long-term misery. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Appreciate that, Andrew. Thank you for sharing that with us.
I mean, all it comes down to is a better version of you is on the other side of any piece of adversity, as long as you have the right mentality. If you don't, it'll destroy you. But if you do have the right mentality, a better version, and I stole that from David Goggins. Just wanted to give him some credit, but it's true. It's true. On the other side of everything you're afraid of, fear, remorse, guilt, shame, is a better version of you that's never existed before. And that's how I get through everything I get through, is because I cannot wait to meet that guy. I would love to meet that guy that's on the other side of it.
Yeah. It will be worth it, trust me, to see what's on the other side. But folks, it's been a privilege and an honor to have Andrew on the show today. I just wanted to let you all know that I'm normally not the type of person that likes to give out spoilers, because sometimes we can't really control what happens in life. But this particular episode, and not because I want to overshare, but this particular episode with Andrew was supposed to be actually shot, face to face in studio, but we're doing it virtual right now, only because with the timing of everything, I just met Andrew a few weeks ago. The book is out; it's available right now, and it's Men's Health Month. I physically couldn't have Andrew come here as soon as possible, but I was able to have him be here virtually. But with that being said, I do want to let you all know that I am officially announcing that Andrew will be returning to the podcast at some point. We're going to talk a lot more about the book. I definitely have some plans, some things that I'm planning to discuss with Andrew eventually, as far as partnerships and whatnot, so that Andrew and I can do what we love to do, and it's literally educate people about resilience. And Andrew has the background. If you folks were paying attention earlier, Andrew mentioned he was a teacher. I didn't even know that. So Andrew has the background of education. Andrew loves to educate people, and I'm sure he hasn't stopped doing that, and he's going to continue to do it. I mean, look at this book. This book is educational. So, folks, check out that book. Here's the link one more time for Fatally Resilient right here. And Andrew, in the near future, if you're open to it, let's go out there. Let's help people heal. Let's, especially young men, young 100%. Men, women as well too, because I care about helping everybody. But there's, Andrew and I both know this. We both know that this is a fact. It's not just something that's made up, that every year, unfortunately, the suicide rate for men is always higher than women. Why is that happening? It's because men or just the male species, they're not on the right path. They're not guided properly. Society has a ball by letting these guys, watching these guys fail, and resulting to that to suicide. I feel like the government, obviously this is not something that I'm making up, but the government benefits when somebody dies, especially men. You know what I'm saying? Because there's funerals, there's this, there's that, there's hospital bills, there's all this stuff death certificate has to be written. It's crazy. And I've lost a lot of male friends in the past to suicide. I've lost family members. You know, apparently my father's dad passed away from suicide. You know, he had cancer and they found him hung in the Dominican Republic. And they said that he killed himself. You know, that was my grandpa. You know, that was my dad's dad.
Right.
And, you know, we know somebody, whether it's someone related to us or just someone that was close to us, we know somebody that passed away from suicide. And folks, we got to break this stigma. We have to educate men more and let men know that it's okay to cry. It's okay to talk. It's okay to express yourself. I mean, look at Andrew. If Andrew cared about validation, like he was talking about earlier, he would have never wrote this book. But he actually wrote this book because he was like, you know what? I'm going to write this book. I'm going to write this book. And I don't care what anybody thinks, but this is something I'm putting out to the world, and it's either going to be received. You know, I'm going to care about those that receive it well, and those that may not probably receive it well. Well, you know what? I'm open to talk about it, right? It's like this podcast. When I started this podcast, a few episodes in, I had people that actually know me personally reach out to me and say, hey, dude, please don't shoot another episode. Nobody cares about your business. Nobody cares about your breakup with your ex-girlfriend. Nobody cares that you almost committed suicide. Nobody cares that you was with this girl and she broke your heart. And that's why you guys couldn't get married. Nobody cares about that.
That's why you have problems like that in society, is because of that mentality.
Exactly. So I'm over here thinking to myself, like, you know, the old me probably would have been like, oh, really? Okay, no problem. Sure, I'll stop right now. And I had a lot of people that were close to me, right? Like even threatening me to, like, if I see one more episode, I'm like, what are you gonna do about it? You're gonna spank me? Yeah. You're gonna block me on social media. You're gonna not talk to me anymore. So guess what? If that's how you want to react, if that's your only solution to me sharing my story, then goodbye.
Right.
I'm 40 years old now. I literally said this the other day to someone who's very close to me. I said, I'm at a point in my life, even though I was making these changes already previous to my 40th birthday. I said, I'm at a point in my life that if folks don't want to be around me anymore, I'm sorry.
Yeah. You have that right.
You know, I'm doing everything in my power to be the most positive person, most positive and transparent person I can be, because at the end of the day, one thing is certain, no one's perfect. We all make mistakes. We're all going to say something silly, something that's going to offend someone. That's just what makes us human. But at least I am wise enough, old enough, and mature enough to understand what accountability is. And when I hear someone tell me, hey, Rob, you offended me, you hurt my feelings, I know how to not just automatically feel attacked and go into like defense mode and then gaslight them. I know how to sit there and process it and say to them, oh, I'm sorry, Andrew. I didn't know I hurt your feelings. I didn't know that what I said, you know, you took it the wrong way. My apologies. Let's talk about it, you know, because I want to make sure that this is not something that stays in your head and you're like, hey, he never apologized. He never took accountability. And I know he's going to do it again at some point. And then it's going to build some type of tension between us, because that used to be me. I used to be that type of person. I had a lot of people out there that I didn't know had resentment towards me or just didn't like me anymore because of things that I said or things that I said to them. And I was super apologetic. And I remember telling my therapist in one of my therapy sessions, it's crazy how I felt that I have spent a lot of my mid-adult life, well, not my mid-adult life, my early adult life, like on an apology tour, just going around randomly apologizing to people that I hurt in the past. And I mentioned to this in one of my episodes a long time ago, that there were folks that received it very well. And they were like, oh, thank you. There was folks that were like, yeah, there was folks that were like, I never thought a guy like you would actually come back and apologize to me.
Yeah.
And then I had the folks that were like, you know, I've been waiting for this. I'm like, you've been waiting for my apology? Yes, I've been waiting. 3 people said that to me. They said, I was waiting for your apology, Rob. I just hope that it didn't end up where you passed away and I never got that apology. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. I'm so sorry. I didn't know you was waiting for an apology. I'm glad. I feel relieved that I was able to apologize to you. And then I had those folks that unfortunately did not want to hear it.
Yeah.
They were like, I don't, you know, you want to apologize to me? That's great, but I don't want to hear it. Maybe someday they will receive it. They will be ready to receive it, hopefully. And if they never do, at least I already showed them exactly. I showed them the willingness, and I showed them that I was taking accountability. to apologize to them. There's people out there. Go ahead.
Once you're willing to at least acknowledge that you did wrong and make a commitment to change the behavior, if that person doesn't want to hear that from you, that's their problem.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to, essentially. Because you can't let your life stall out waiting for somebody to accept your apology. As long as your side of the street is clean, meaning you're willing to make the apology, you're committed to change the behavior so that it doesn't happen again. There's no sense in waiting for somebody to accept your apology.
Exactly.
You did the right thing.
Exactly. You know, there's folks out there that they've watched this podcast and these episodes, and a lot of them have said to me, congratulations, you're doing the work. And then I've had a few, if I could say top of my head, maybe two have said to me, oh, I don't think you've really changed. I think that you haven't done the work, whatever the case may be. I was like, that's fine. If that's how you feel. Yeah. You know, I know what I've done. You know, God knows what I've done. Right. The people that really matter, they've seen the change. My therapist tells me all the time, like my current therapist, she's been my therapist for what, 4 years? So she's told me in the last year, and especially now in 2026, she's told me I've seen the changes. The language has changed. The mentality has changed. She goes, this is not just something you can just, you know, fake. She was like, people's mindsets, they change when they're supposed to change, and it happens organically. You know,
if somebody doesn't want to accept that, that's not your problem.
Exactly. So, you know, I'm doing what I can for me, for those that are watching, those that I'm inspiring. I have youth that looks up to me. I have people that tell me, you know, people that follow me on social media that tell me they're inspired. I have a baby niece who's 2 years old, who I love so much. And I have more nieces and nephews, but, you know, she's the littlest right now. Right. And, you know, I've said this before in a few episodes. When she is old enough to know who her Uncle Rob is, I want her to have a positive mindset about her uncle and not be like, oh, my uncle was just another loser. You know, right. I want her to actually be like, wow, my uncle was actually making changes. Thank you for breaking cycles, and thank you for teaching and educating people the way you did.
Breaking that generational trauma.
Exactly. So that's
a big deal.
Exactly. That's who I want to be.
Yeah.
So, folks, we're getting to the end of this beautiful conversation with Andrew. And again, Andrew, I know you've thanked me, but I'm thanking you once again for coming on this episode. I appreciate you for taking this time today to talk to us about your book, to talk about Equanimity, to talk about Andrew's life and everything else. Thank you again for, you know, fighting the good fight. Thank you for remaining resilient. And I look forward to having you again as a guest on this episode. And when he does return, I promise you that it will be in studio. It will be me and Andrew, you know, right across from one another.
Looking forward to that.
I look forward to that too. So, Andrew, before we go, I have to ask you one more question. And this is a question that I ask everyone that comes on this episode. Okay. My final question to you is, what is your message to the world and why?
I'm going to address this specifically as it applies to men's mental health. Now, without any desire to change, the mind that created the problem is not capable of creating the solution. And what I mean by that is professional help, therapy, 12-step support groups is necessary. Another thing, and this is something I live my life by, the greatest predictor of your future is your past. Mm-hmm. So if you want something that you've never had before, you have to do something that you've never done before.
Mm-hmm.
And then to close it off with, your last name's Aurelius. One of my favorite Stoics is Marcus Aurelius. And one of his best quotes is, if it's humanly possible, consider it within your reach. Most roadblocks, most barriers are self-imposed.
Mm-hmm.
The constructs of our own mind.
Oh, yeah.
Society's not putting them on us. Or maybe they're trying and we're accepting it, but it's all self-imposed.
Yes, I agree with that. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for sharing that with us. And like I said, you know, it's been such a pleasure and an honor to have you on this episode 58. So, folks, you know, this has been a great episode, and the conversation will continue. We'll continue to talk about resilience this month, and we'll continue to talk about men's health. We'll continue to talk about being fatally resilient, and talk about equanimity. Folks, before we go, I do have one little spoiler to give you guys. Last month, I wrote a beautiful article in the Resilience Tribune. If you want to take a look, just visit this link right here. But I normally don't do this. I never tell people who's going to be the next person to write a story on the Resilience Tribune, but today I'm going to do that. It's official. This month's article on the Resilience Tribune is going to be written by yours truly, Andrew J. Minuto. So we're going to have a great article coming out later on this month from Andrew. I will, by the next episode, it should be out, and I'll let you guys know. It's going to be a great article. I look forward to it. And, Andrew wrote Fatally Resilient. So I just can't wait for you all to see this article when it comes out, So Andrew, thank you for being on the Resilient Podcast. Thank you for sharing your message with the world today. I truly appreciate it. Remember to always remain resilient. And folks, on behalf of myself and Andrew, I am Rob Aurelius. This is the Resilient Podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all in episode 59. But for now, peace.